Nate Saunders is joining me, and happy 70th anniversary of the Formula One Championship celebrated today at Silverstone, Nate, and very fittingly. And we didn't exactly get the fireworks in terms of tires blowing off like last weekend, but still a very, very good race, I would say. So much so that we didn't see Mercedes number 1 and 2 again. Instead, it was 2 and 3, and Max Verstappen tops that podium. First time Red Bull topping the podium since 2012 at Silverstone. So massive achievement. What impressed you the most about how this race was planned out?
Well, I think it was for a race that was signifying and kind of recognizing Formula One's past. It was nice to see a classic 2-stop race. We don't usually get those now. It's usually a 1-stop race, which limits the strategy. But because of the tyre change that we had for this weekend, it really opened things up. And Max Verstappen, I mean, what a performance from him, and also what a performance from the guys on the Red Bull pit wall and the strategists. As a team, you know, as a whole unit on that side of the garage, they absolutely nailed this race. And the foundation of the win was planted on Saturday when they made that decision to qualify on the hard tyre. And he started on an offset strategy to Mercedes. And asking him yesterday in the press conference, we said, is that the only chance you have to beat them? And he said, yeah, you know, we have to do something different. We have to put them under pressure. And we've seen this before. When Mercedes gets put under a bit of pressure, they don't always react to it in the best way. And Valtteri Bottas after the race said that he felt like the team was just sleeping when Verstappen got ahead of them. And it seemed like there was a spell in the middle of that race where they didn't really respond. But from Verstappen's point of view, did everything he could. There was a point when the team said, we need you to hold back a bit, not attack so hard. And he said, look, I'm not going to win the race by driving like a grandma here. I've got to get past them. So I think he really took the race by the scruff of the neck. And again, you know, we talk about Verstappen all the time, but this is why he's rated so highly. You know, he just put that car in a position where the race was his to lose by about mid-race. It was fantastic. And he's now 30 points behind Lewis. Now, that's a lot. We've been saying Bottas is 30 points behind Lewis. The championship is done and dusted. It's a long way back. But you think without that retirement in Austria at the start of the season, this championship could look much closer right now than it does. So a glimmer of hope, I suppose, for Verstappen. But I think this race was quite different to the ones we're going to get. But yeah, superb stuff from Max.
And then after last weekend, from what we saw happened with the both Mercedes cars, of course, it was an absolute disaster for Valtteri Bottas finishing outside the points. Lewis Hamilton's limping across the finish line. We didn't see that as much this time. I'm sure many drivers would switch 2 and 3 for them, but we know that that is not what Mercedes like. They did look visibly subdued after the race. Lewis Hamilton not as critical, I would say, as Valtteri Bottas was. And I mean, rightfully so. He is sitting pretty at the top of the Drivers' Championship by a mile. But still, what was your thoughts on what went on there with Mercedes tire issues that, again, we've seen for a second week in a row?
Yeah, I think Mercedes are really going to have to deep dive into this. And I think luckily for them, we're not going to have a lot of races this year, like I mentioned, where it's going to be 2-stop races. But this really seemed to get away from them quickly. And I think that they were almost overthinking things with the tyre strategy. You know, at one point they left Lewis out there. And, you know, you mentioned last week, he was asking on the radio, like, are these tyres going to be okay? Are they going to go again? So clearly that was going on in his head. And poor Bottas, you know, at the end was basically completely defenseless against Lewis. Lewis had just come in for new tyres. Yeah, and we see this occasionally with Mercedes. They get things very, very wrong, and they will absolutely analyze everything and usually come out quite strong on the other side of it. So from that point of view, I think that this will be one of those things where they learn something from. But yeah, they really kind of left the door open for Verstappen. I think Verstappen did a great job, but they just seemed that they weren't on the ball with their decisions as they usually are. And we've seen it before in hotter conditions. Mercedes do tend to struggle, and this seemed to be, if you compare the conditions last week to this week, this does seem to be a factor in that. But of course, we'll learn more over the next couple of hours and the next couple of days, I suppose.
And then for better or for worse, there's been a lot of talk about Racing Point this week, you know, from the protests and then, of course, from Nico Hülkenberg, whether we could see him get a podium or not. We didn't see the podium, but someone that could have probably made it on that podium if, you know, 1 or 2 things happen again is Charles Leclerc. And just comparing the 2 Ferrari drivers, another nightmare day or day to forget for Sebastian Vettel. And Charles Leclerc having this car to continuously punch above its weight, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the perfect way to put it. And Vettel just looks so ordinary compared to Leclerc at the moment. You know, we spoke yesterday after qualifying about how bad he looked. So I'm gonna focus this on Leclerc because I think he did such a good job. Yeah, I would not have put that Ferrari car beating Racing Point, you know, out there today. And he did such a good job in the first stint that they were basically able to just put him on a 1-stop race. And his lap times at the end were awful because what he was doing was just bringing the car home. He had a huge gap to the guys behind him. And that it isn't me criticizing him. You know, he'd put himself into that position. He'd done a really, really good job to get there. So if you look at all of Ferrari's good results this year, they're on the back of Charles Leclerc. You know, he's been the one dragging them into the podium positions. So yeah, it's unbelievable. If he wasn't there, if he was underperforming, Ferrari would be in. I mean, they're not having a great season at all, obviously, but they'd be in an even worse position. Just to put it into context for you, Vettel is 13th in the championship. 13th position, which is insane. And I'm starting to wonder whether he sees the season out for Ferrari, because he's just getting worse and worse. I don't see what he's benefiting, what he's gaining them. You know, he was criticizing their strategy over the radio. He doesn't sound like a guy in love with Ferrari like he has in previous seasons. So yeah, real tale of two drivers there at Ferrari currently.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.